The galaxy had seen hunters before, men bound by codes and credits, chasing fugitives through stars that remembered their names. But when a creature fell through a rift in reality itself, something changed. He could not be killed, he would not stop, and the Jedi he hunted began to wonder if survival was even possible against a predator who had already died 1,000 times and simply refused to stay dead. Can the Force protect you from something the universe itself cannot destroy? The moon of Nar Krita hung like a bruised eye over the outer rim, its surface scarred by strip mines and the sprawling palace complexes of Hutt cartels who had carved kingdoms from desperation and spice. The sky churned with dust storms that never ceased, and beneath that copper veil, the dregs of 1,000 species bartered in flesh, secrets, and blood. It was a place where the Republic's light had never reached, where the Empire's grip was a distant rumor, and where survival was the only law that mattered. Into that lawless twilight, something fell. It came not through hyperspace but through a rupture in the fabric of reality itself, a screaming tear that vomited lightning and exhaust fumes across the dunes. The object was a vehicle, though no mechanic in the galaxy would have recognized its design. Chrome and defiance welded into the shape of a two-wheeled monstrosity, its engine roaring with a sound that preceded creation. Astride it sat a figure clad in black leather and chains, his skin the color of bleached bone, his eyes burning red with an intensity that could have ionized atmosphere. Lobo, the main man, last of the Zarnians, hit the surface of Nar Krita at 400 kilometers per hour and did not slow. The bike tore through a slaver encampment, scattering Nikto guards and incinerating their speeder bikes in a wall of flame. Lobo laughed, a sound like grinding metal, and yanked the handlebars hard to the left. The bike obeyed with savage glee, carving a trench, through the sand deep enough to bury a land speeder. Behind him, the rift sealed with a sound like bones breaking, and the only evidence it had ever existed was the smoking crater and the screaming. Lobo skidded to a halt outside a cantina built from the hollowed ribcage of some ancient beast, kicked the stand down, and swaggered inside. The cantina fell silent. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward the door, toward the towering figure whose boots left scorch marks on the stone floor. Lobo grinned, revealing teeth filed to points, and cracked his knuckles with the deliberate care of a predator selecting prey. "All right, fraggers," he said, his voice a gravel avalanche. "Who's in charge of this dirtball?" A Weequay with cybernetic tusks stepped forward, blaster rifle raised. "You picked the wrong place to make trouble, Offworlder." Lobo's grin widened. "Offworlder. I like that. Makes me sound exotic." The Weequay fired. The bolt caught Lobo square in the chest, burning a hole through his leather vest and the flesh beneath. Lobo glanced down at the wound, watched it smoke, then looked back up at the Weequay with an expression of profound disappointment. "That," Lobo said, "was rude." He moved. The cantina exploded into violence. Lobo crossed the distance in a single stride, grabbed the Weequay by the skull, and slammed him through the bar with enough force to crack the permacrete foundation. Blaster fire erupted from every corner. Lobo walked through it, each bolt punching holes in his body that closed almost as quickly as they appeared. He seized a Rhodian by the antenna, swung him like a club into 3 Gamorrean guards, then hurled the broken body through the wall. A Trandoshan with a vibro axe charged. Lobo caught the blade bare-handed, yanked it free, and drove the handle into the Trandoshan's throat hard enough to collapse his windpipe. The body hit the floor. Lobo planted a boot on its chest and surveyed the cantina, which had gone very quiet again. "Now," Lobo said, "let's try this again. Who runs this dump?" A protocol droid, dented and missing one photoreceptor, raised a trembling arm. "The Hutt Consortium maintains administrative oversight of Nar Krita, sir. Lord Gorga, the Magnanimous, holds primary authority over this district." "Gorga." Lobo tasted the name, decided he liked it. "Where's his palace?" 17 kilometers northeast, sir. May I inquire as to your business?" Lobo leaned down until his face was level with the droid's remaining photoreceptor. I'm looking for work. And if this Gorga's got any brains in that slug body, he'll hire me before I get bored. The droid's vocabulator crackled with static. I shall relay your message immediately, sir. Smart, droid. Lobo straightened, kicked a corpse out of his path, and walked back into the dust storm. The palace of Gorga the Hutt rose from the sand like a tumor, all turrets and slave pens and landing platforms crowded with rust-eaten freighters. Lobo's bike roared up the main causeway, scattering guards and courtiers, and came to a halt at the base of the throne room steps. He dismounted, slinging a massive hook and chain over his shoulder, and ascended. Gorga the Hutt lounged on a repulsor dais, surrounded by Twi'lek dancers and Klatooinian enforcers. He was enormous, even by Hutt standards, his flesh mottled green and brown, his eyes small and calculating. When Lobo entered, those eyes narrowed with interest. "You are the one who destroyed my cantina," Gorga said in Huttese, his voice a wet rumble. A translator droid scurried forward to render the words in Basic. "Yep," Lobo said. "Your boys started it. I finished it." "You are not Mandalorian," Gorga observed, "though you dress like one. You are not human, though you walk upright." "What are you?" "I'm the main man," Lobo said. "Last Charnian, best bounty hunter in any universe, and I'm here to make you an offer." Gorga's lipless mouth curled into something approximating a smile. "I do not accept offers. I make them." "Then make one," Lobo said. "I'm listening." Gorga gestured with a pudgy arm. A hologram flickered to life above the dais, displaying the face of a human male with sun-darkened skin, wild dreadlocks, and a yellow stripe painted across his eyes. The image rotated, showing scars, tattoos, and the unmistakable hilt of a lightsaber clipped to his belt. "Quinlan Vos," Gorga said. "Jedi Knight, fugitive, thief. He raided one of my spice convoys on Ord Mantell and killed 17 of my best soldiers. The Bounty Hunters Guild has been pursuing him for 3 standard months without success. I will pay 1 million credits to whoever brings me his head." Lobo studied the hologram, his red eyes gleaming. "A Jedi. Haven't killed one of those in a while." "Then you accept?" "Yeah," Lobo said. "I accept, but when I bring you his head, you're gonna owe me more than credits. You're gonna owe me respect." Gorga laughed, a sound like wet stones grinding together. "Earn it, outsider, earn it, and we shall speak again." Lobo turned and descended the steps, whistling a tune no one in the galaxy had ever heard. Behind him, Gorga's court returned to its revelry, unaware that they had just set a predator loose upon a prey far more dangerous than any of them could imagine. Quinlan Vos felt the disturbance an hour later. He stood on the observation deck of a stolen freighter, watching hyperspace stream past in ribbons of blue and white, when the force rippled around him like water disturbed by something massive moving beneath the surface. It was not the cold malice of the Sith, nor the rigid discipline of the Jedi Order he had abandoned. It was something else, something hungry and vast, and utterly without fear. Quinlan closed his eyes and reached deeper. The force showed him fragments, a pale figure wreathed in flame, a moon stained red with violence, a chain swinging through darkness. He saw his own face reflected in burning eyes, saw himself running, fighting, bleeding. He opened his eyes and exhaled slowly. "Well," he muttered, "this is going to be interesting." The freighter dropped out of hyperspace near the abandoned mining station of Veskar's Drift, a skeletal structure orbiting a dead star. Quinlan had chosen it for its obscurity, its distance from Imperial patrols and guild informants. He guided the ship into a docking bay, powered down the engines, and sat in the cockpit for a long moment, feeling the force swirl around him like a living thing. Footsteps echoed in the corridor behind him. Quinlan's hand dropped to his lightsaber. "Relax, Vos," a familiar voice said. "It's just me." A woman stepped into the cockpit, tall and lean, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid. She wore combat armor scavenged from a dozen worlds and carried a blaster rifle like she had been born with it. Her name was Thessa Kavil, former Republic intelligence, current fugitive, and the closest thing Quinlan had to an ally. "Thought you were supposed to be gathering supplies," Quinlan said. "Ran into a problem." Thessa dropped a datapad onto the console. "Got a message from one of my old contacts. Says there's a new hunter on your trail. Not Guild, not Imperial, something else." Quinlan activated the datapad. The screen flickered to life, displaying grainy security footage from Nar Krita. He watched a pale figure tear through the cantina, shrugging off blaster fire like rain, leaving corpses in his wake. He watched the figure mount a chrome vehicle that should not have existed and vanish into the dust. "That's not possible," Quinlan said softly. "Which part?" Thessa leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. "The part where he tanked a dozen blaster bolts, or the part where he walked away from it?" "All of it." Quinlan rewound the footage, watched it again. "The Force is screaming every time I look at him. He's not just dangerous, he's wrong, like he doesn't belong here." "Maybe he doesn't," Thessa said. "Maybe that's what makes him so effective." Quinlan deactivated the datapad and stood. "We need to move. If he's already picked up my trail, he'll track the ship's hyperdrive signature. We've got maybe 6 hours before he finds us." "And then what?" Quinlan ignited his lightsaber, the green blade casting emerald shadows across the cockpit. "Then I find out if Jedi training is enough to stop something that can't die." Lobo found the freighter 4 hours later. He had tracked it the old-fashioned way, bribing spaceport officials and torturing informants until someone mentioned Veskar's drift. The station hung in the void like a corpse, its lights dead, its transmitters silent. Lobo grinned and gunned the bike's engine. The bike did not need air to fly. It had been built in a dimension where physics was a polite suggestion, and it obeyed Lobo's will with the loyalty of a trained predator. He roared through the vacuum, trailing fire and exhaust, and slammed into the station's docking bay hard enough to buckle the blast doors. The impact threw him from the bike. He hit the deck, rolled to his feet, and drew the hook and chain from his back. The weapon sang as he spun it overhead, a sound like wind through razors. "All right, Jedi," Lobo shouted into the empty bay. "I know you're here. Come out and make this easy, or I'll tear this whole station apart and make it fun." Silence answered him. Then, from the shadows above, a voice. "You're not from here." Lobo looked up. Quinlan Voss stood on a catwalk 20 meters overhead, lightsaber ignited, his expression unreadable. "Nope," Lobo said. "I'm from somewhere better. Somewhere with style." "The Force doesn't recognize you," Quinlan said. "You're like a blank space, a hole where something should be. Flattery'll get you nowhere, pal." Lobo swung the chain, and the hook shot upward with the speed of a railgun slug. Quinlan moved. The Force surged around him, propelling him backward as the hook punched through the catwalk where he had been standing. Metal shrieked and tore. Quinlan landed on a lower platform, rolled, and came up running. Lobo yanked the chain. The hook tore free, trailing sparks, and he swung it again. This time Quinlan caught it with the force, halting its momentum mid-air. For a moment they stood frozen, predator and prey locked in a contest of wills. Then Lobo grinned and pulled. The force shattered like glass. Quinlan gasped as the feedback slammed into him, driving him to one knee. Lobo reeled in the chain, crossed the bay in 3 strides, and swung a fist the size of a hydra spanner at Quinlan's head. Quinlan ducked, swept his lightsaber in a low arc, and carved a glowing line across Lobo's thigh. The blade bit deep, severing muscle and bone, and Lobo's leg buckled. For exactly 3 seconds, Lobo looked down at the wound, watched the flesh knit itself back together, then looked up at Quinlan with an expression of delighted surprise. "That tickled," he said. Quinlan's eyes widened. "What are you?" "I told you," Lobo said. "I'm the main man." He lunged. Quinlan brought the lightsaber up in a guard, but Lobo's fist crashed through the blade's path and connected with Quinlan's ribs. The impact lifted Quinlan off his feet and hurled him across the bay. He hit a support pillar hard enough to crack it, slumped to the deck, and tasted blood. The Force screamed at him to move. Quinlan rolled as Lobo's boot came down where his head had been, cratering the deck. He came up slashing, the lightsaber weaving a net of green light, and carved a dozen wounds across Lobo's torso, each one sealed before the blade had finished its arc. "You're gonna have to do better than that," Lobo said. Quinlan reached into the Force and pulled. A cargo container the size of a speeder tore free from its moorings and hurtled toward Lobo. Lobo caught it one-handed, crushed it into scrap, and hurled the wreckage back. Quinlan deflected it with the Force, but the effort left him exposed. Lobo closed the distance, grabbed Quinlan by the throat, and lifted him into the air. "Here's the deal," Lobo said, his breath reeking of chemicals and violence. "You can come with me quiet, or you can come with me in pieces. Either way, I get paid." Quinlan's vision tunneled. He reached out with the Force, not to attack but to understand. He touched Lobo's mind and recoiled instantly. What he found there was not a mind but a bonfire, a roaring inferno of rage and joy, and an absolute certainty in his own invincibility. There was no fear, no doubt, no weakness to exploit. Lobo was not a man. He was a natural disaster given flesh. Quinlan stopped struggling. He gasped. "I can't beat you." Lobo's grin widened. "Smart Jedi. But I don't have to." Quinlan triggered the thermal detonator hidden in his belt. The explosion vaporized the platform, the catwalk, and a significant portion of the docking bay. Lobo's grip vanished as the blast wave tore them apart. Quinlan felt himself falling, felt the Force cushion his descent, and then he hit the deck and blacked out. When he woke, Thessa was dragging him through the station's corridors, her rifle slung over one shoulder. "You're insane," she said. "Blowing yourself up is not a strategy." "It worked," Quinlan groaned. His ribs screamed with every breath. "Where is he?" "Still in the docking bay, I think. Hard to tell when there's no body to confirm." They reached the freighter and sealed the hatch behind them. Thessa fired the engines, disengaged the docking clamps, and punched the throttle. The ship lurched forward, escaping the station's gravity well, and jumped to hyperspace. Quinlan collapsed into the pilot's chair and closed his eyes. The Force was still screaming, a high, thin note of warning that set his teeth on edge. "He's not dead," Quinlan said. "What?" "He's not dead. That thing, whatever he is, he can't die. I felt it when I touched his mind. He's been killed 1,000 times, and it never sticks." Thessa stared at him. Then, "How do we stop him?" Quinlan didn't answer. He reached into the Force, searching for guidance, and found only the pale figure's burning eyes staring back. In the ruins of Veskar's drift, Lobo pulled himself out of the wreckage and laughed. Half his body was charred black, his left arm hanging by a thread of sinew, his skull visible through the burned flesh of his face. He spat out a tooth, felt it regenerate in his jaw, and cracked his neck with a sound like breaking timber. "Now that," he said to no one, "was fraggin' fun." He found his bike buried under a collapsed bulkhead, dug it out with his bare hands, and kick-started the engine. It roared to life, defiant as ever, and Lobo swung himself into the saddle. "All right, Jedi," he said, revving the throttle. Round 2. The chase became legend in the Outer Rim. Quinlan Vos fled from system to system, never staying longer than a day. Always moving. Always hunted. Lobo followed, an unstoppable force that left a trail of wrecked ships and shattered space stations in his wake. The Bounty Hunters Guild issued warnings to stay clear of the pursuit. Imperial patrols avoided the sectors where Lobo operated, unwilling to engage something that could shrug off turbo laser fire. On Ord Mantell, Quinlan tried to lose himself in the urban sprawl, blending into the crowds of refugees and smugglers. Lobo found him in 6 hours, crashing through the marketplace on his bike and leveling an entire city block in the ensuing fight. Quinlan escaped by collapsing a transit tunnel, burying Lobo under 1,000 tons of rubble. It bought him 2 days. On Ryloth, Quinlan sought the aid of the Free Ryloth movement, hoping their guerrilla networks could hide him. Lobo arrived during a council meeting, kicked down the doors of their underground bunker, and demanded to know where the Jedi was. When they refused, he started breaking fingers. Quinlan revealed himself to prevent a massacre, led Lobo into the Twi'lek catacombs, and brought the ceiling down on both of them. Lobo dug his way out in 4 hours and resumed the hunt. On Felucia, Quinlan tried a different approach. He ambushed Lobo in the fungal jungles, using the Force to turn the environment itself into a weapon. Carnivorous plants ensnared Lobo's limbs. Sarlacc spawn erupted from the ground to drag him down. Quinlan fought with a fury born of desperation, his lightsaber carving through Lobo's body again and again. Lobo just laughed and kept coming. The fight ended when Lobo grabbed Quinlan by the leg, swung him like a club into a tree the size of a starship, and left him broken in the mud. He stood over the Jedi, breathing hard, and for the first time allowed himself a moment of respect. "You got guts, Jedi," Lobo said. "I'll give you that. But guts don't mean nothing when you're up against someone who can't die." Quinlan coughed blood. "Why are you doing this?" "The credits?" "Credits are nice," Lobo admitted. "But mostly, I'm doing it 'cause it's fun. 'Cause you're the first guy in this whole fraggin' galaxy who's given me a real fight." "There's no honor in this," Quinlan said. "You're just a killer." "Honor." Lobo spat the word like poison. "Honor's for chumps who die noble. Me? I live forever and take what I want. That's the only rule that matters." He reached down, grabbed Quinlan by the collar, and hauled him upright. "Now come on. Gorga's waitin', and I got a reputation to maintain." Before he could take a step, the jungle exploded with light. A Star Destroyer dropped out of hyperspace above Felucia, its shadow eclipsing the sun. TIE fighters screamed through the atmosphere, strafing the jungle with laser fire. Lobo looked up, grinned, and dropped Quinlan back into the mud. "Looks like we got company," he said. The Imperial forces had been tracking the chaos for weeks, watching reports of a pale destroyer and a fugitive Jedi spiral across the outer rim. Now, sensing an opportunity, they moved to capture both. Stormtroopers descended, in dropships, their white armor gleaming against the fungal canopy, and formed a perimeter around the jungle clearing. An officer emerged from the lead transport, his uniform immaculate, his face cold. "You are both under arrest by order of the Galactic Empire. Surrender now, and you will be treated with appropriate leniency." Lobo looked at Quinlan. Quinlan looked at Lobo. "Appropriate leniency," Quinlan said. "That's rich." "Yeah," Lobo said. "I don't do lenient." They moved as one. Quinlan ignited his lightsaber and launched himself into the stormtrooper line, his blade a green blur. Lobo drew his hook and chain, swung it overhead, and let it fly. The hook punched through a trooper's chest, burst out his back, and caught the soldier behind him in the helmet. Lobo yanked, and both bodies flew toward him like rag dolls. The jungle became a war zone. Blaster fire crisscrossed the clearing, turning trees to ash and soldiers to corpses. Quinlan moved through the chaos with the grace of a court dancer, deflecting bolts, disarming troopers, using the Force to turn their own weapons against them. Lobo fought with the subtlety of an avalanche, crushing skulls, snapping spines, laughing as the Imperials tried and failed to bring him down. An AT-ST walker stomped into the clearing, its guns swiveling toward Lobo. He grabbed a fallen trooper's blaster rifle, fired 3 shots into the walker's viewport, and charged. The walker fired, its cannons tearing chunks out of Lobo's torso, but he did not stop. He reached the walker, grabbed one of its legs, and pulled. Metal shrieked. The walker toppled, crashed into the jungle floor, and exploded. Lobo walked out of the fireball, his body regenerating, and turned to find Quinlan standing beside him. "We need to leave," Quinlan said. "Now." "Agreed," Lobo said. They ran. Behind them, the Imperial forces regrouped, and above them, the Star Destroyer's turbolasers began to fire. The jungle burned. Quinlan and Lobo reached the edge of the clearing, dove into the undergrowth, and vanished into the fungal labyrinth. They did not speak as they ran. The force and pure survival instinct drove them forward, through tunnels of bioluminescent fungus and across ravines that plunged into darkness. The Imperials followed, their searchlights cutting through the gloom, but the jungle swallowed them whole. Hours later, in a cavern deep beneath the surface, Quinlan and Lobo stopped to catch their breath. "This doesn't change anything," Quinlan said. "You're still hunting me." "Yep," Lobo said. "But right now, the Empire's a bigger pain in my ass than you are. So how about we call a truce? Just till we're off this rock." Quinlan studied him, reaching into the Force, and found something unexpected. Beneath the rage and the violence, there was a kind of honesty. Lobo did not lie. He did not deceive. He simply was. "Fine," Quinlan said. "Truce. But the moment we're clear, we're enemies again." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Lobo said. They shook hands. The cavern trembled as another turbo laser blast struck the surface above. The cavern system beneath Felucia stretched for kilometers, a labyrinth carved by ancient waterways and expanded by the planet's ever-shifting ecosystem. Quinlan led the way through the darkness, using the Force to sense the path ahead, while Lobo followed with the casual confidence of something that had nothing to fear from the dark. They emerged into a grotto where phosphorescent fungi clung to the walls like dying stars, casting pale blue light across pools of still water. Quinlan paused at the edge of one pool, staring at his reflection. His face was haggard, lined with exhaustion and pain. Blood crusted the corner of his mouth. His robes were torn, his body a map of bruises. "You look like hell," Lobo said, coming to stand beside him. "I feel worse," Quinlan admitted. He knelt by the water, cupped his hands, and drank. The liquid was cold and tasted faintly of minerals. "How do you do it?" "Do what?" "Keep going. Keep fighting. You've been blown up, shot, cut apart, and you just keep coming. Don't you ever get tired?" Lobo considered the question. "Nah, tired's for people who can die. Me? I got all the time in the universe. No point wasting it on being tired." Quinlan stood, wiping his mouth. "That must be lonely." "Lonely?" Lobo laughed. "Lonely's when you got nobody. I got me. That's all I need." "Is it?" Quinlan studied him, and for a moment the Force showed him something beneath the violence, beneath the bravado. A vast emptiness, a void where connection should have been. Lobo was alone, not by choice but by nature, the last of his kind, a creature so fundamentally different from everything around him that he could never truly belong. Quinlan felt a flicker of pity, quickly suppressed. "We should keep moving. The Imperials won't stop searching. Let 'em search," Lobo said. "I'm having too much fun." They moved deeper into the caverns, following a stream that wound, through chambers filled with crystalline formations and sleeping creatures that stirred at their passage. Quinlan felt the Force pulse around them, a living current that flowed through every stone and root. Felucia was strong in the Force, and here, beneath the surface, that strength was almost overwhelming. He reached out, searching for Thessa, and found her presence faint but steady. She was still alive, still hiding somewhere on the surface. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by guilt. He had dragged her into this, into a war she had not asked for, against an enemy she could not defeat. "You're thinking too much," Lobo said. "I can hear it from here." "I'm thinking about my friend," Quinlan said. "The one who's risking her life because of me." "Then go back for her," Lobo said. "Or don't. Either way, quit moping about it." "I can't go back, not while the Empire's there. Not while you're hunting me." "So, what's the plan, Jedi? Run forever?" "'Cause I gotta tell you, that gets old fast." Quinlan stopped walking. He turned to face Lobo, his hand resting on his lightsaber. "I don't know. I've been running for so long, I've forgotten what it's like to stand still, to have a plan beyond survival. Sounds miserable, Lobo said. It is, Quinlan admitted. But it's all I have. They stood in silence, two predators caught in a moment of unexpected honesty. Then the cavern shook, dust raining from the ceiling, and the moment passed. Imperials, Quinlan said. They're using seismic charges to collapse the tunnels. Good, Lobo said, cracking his knuckles. I was getting bored. They ran as the caverns began to collapse around them. Stone pillars cracked and fell, crushing fungal growths and filling the air with spores that glowed like embers. Quinlan used the force to shield them from the worst of it, redirecting falling debris and creating pockets of safety in the chaos. Lobo simply powered through, his body absorbing impacts that would have pulverized a normal being. They burst into a larger chamber, this one dominated by a massive sinkhole that opened to the surface. Sunlight streamed down through the aperture, illuminating the ruin of the jungle above. Imperial dropships circled the opening, their searchlights probing the depths. There, Quinlan said, pointing to a narrow ledge that spiraled up the sinkhole's wall. We can climb. Or, Lobo said, we can do this. He grabbed Quinlan by the collar, kicked off the ground, and launched himself upward with a force that defied gravity. They rocketed through the air, Lobo's legs pistoning as he bounded from ledge to ledge, using the sinkhole's walls like stepping stones. Quinlan held on, too stunned to protest, as the surface rushed toward them. They broke through the canopy in a shower of vegetation and landed in the midst of an Imperial encampment. Stormtroopers scattered, officers shouted orders, and heavy weapons swiveled toward them. Lobo dropped Quinlan and grinned. Now this, he said, is more like it. The battle was brief and brutal. Lobo tore through the encampment like a force of nature, his hook and chain dismantling soldiers and equipment with equal enthusiasm. Quinlan moved with him, his lightsaber a blur of green light, cutting through blaster barrels and deflecting bolts into fuel tanks. The encampment became an inferno. In the chaos, Quinlan spotted Thessa. She was pinned down behind a stack of supply crates, returning fire with her rifle. He reached out through the force, caught her attention, and pointed toward a parked Imperial shuttle at the edge of the clearing. Thessa nodded and began to move. Quinlan fought his way toward her, carving a path through the stormtroopers. Lobo noticed and followed, his presence a wall of violence that cleared the way. They reached Thessa together, and she stared at Lobo with open disbelief. "Is that him?" She shouted over the sound of blaster fire. "Yes," Quinlan said. "Long story. We need to leave. Now." They ran for the shuttle. An AT-ST stepped into their path, its cannons charging. Lobo hurled his chain, wrapped it around one of the walker's legs, and pulled. The walker toppled, crashing into the shuttle and crushing its starboard wing. "Nice job," Thessa said. "Oops," Lobo said. They found another shuttle on the far side of the encampment, this one intact. Thessa hot-wired the controls, while Quinlan and Lobo held off the pursuing stormtroopers. The engines roared to life. The ramp began to close, and they leapt inside as the shuttle lifted off. The Star Destroyer's tractor beams reached for them, but Thessa was already punching in hyperspace coordinates. The shuttle jumped, and Felucia vanished behind them. In the cargo hold, Quinlan slumped against the bulkhead, exhausted. Lobo stood over him, arms crossed, grinning. "That was fun," Lobo said. "We should do it again sometime." "You're insane," Quinlan said. "Probably," Lobo agreed. "But I'm also alive. That counts for something." Thessa emerged from the cockpit, her expression grim. "We've got a problem. That jump burned out the hyperdrive motivator. We're stuck in real space until I can fix it." "How long?" Quinlan asked. 6 hours, maybe 8. "And where are we?" Thessa checked the nav computer. "Middle of nowhere, close to the Tyon cluster. No Imperial presence, no guild stations. We're safe for now." Quinlan closed his eyes and reached into the Force. The warning he had felt before was still there, a distant echo of danger, but for the moment they were alone. He allowed himself to relax, just slightly, and felt his body begin to shut down. "Get some rest," Thessa said. "Both of you. I'll keep watch." Quinlan wanted to argue, but exhaustion claimed him. He slipped into unconsciousness, his dreams filled with fire and the sound of Lobo's laughter. When he woke, the shuttle was in hyperspace again, the stars streaming past in familiar blue and white. Quinlan sat up, wincing at the pain in his ribs, and found Lobo sitting across from him, cleaning his hook with a rag. "Where are we going?" Quinlan asked. "Your friend says we're heading to some backwater called Dantooine," Lobo said. "Says you got contacts there." "I did," Quinlan said. "Once. Before the Empire. They still alive?" "I don't know. I haven't been back in years." Lobo shrugged. "Guess we'll find out." Quinlan stood, steadying himself against the bulkhead, and made his way to the cockpit. Thessa sat in the pilot's chair, her hands steady on the controls. "Why Dantooine?" Quinlan asked. "Because it's remote," Thessa said. "Because the Empire doesn't care about it. And because you need time to heal before he decides the truce is over." She nodded toward the cargo hold, where Lobo was now whistling tunelessly to himself. "How long do we have?" Quinlan asked. "Until we land. Maybe a day after that. Then he'll come for you again. You know that, right?" "I know," Quinlan said. "But maybe by then I'll have figured out how to stop him." "Or maybe you won't," Thessa said. "Maybe you'll just keep running until one of you gets lucky." Quinlan didn't answer. He stared out at the hyperspace tunnel, searching for answers in the endless blue, and found nothing. Dantooine appeared like a memory, green and rolling, its grasslands stretching to horizons unmarred by cities or war. The shuttle descended through thin clouds and landed near the ruins of the old Jedi enclave, a place that had once been a sanctuary and was now only ghosts. Quinlan stepped out onto the grass, feeling the Force breathe around him. This place had been strong in the light once, a beacon for Jedi seeking wisdom and peace. Now it was empty, abandoned after the Purge, its halls silent and its gardens overgrown. Lobo followed him out, stretching his arms above his head. "Nice place. Little quiet for my taste, but nice." "It was a school," Quinlan said. "A place where Jedi came to learn." "What happened to it?" "The same thing that happened to all of us," Quinlan said. "The Empire." They walked through the ruins, past crumbling walls and shattered meditation chambers. Quinlan felt the echoes of the past pressing against him, the voices of teachers and students long dead. He paused in what had once been the main hall, where a fountain had stood at the center, and closed his eyes. The Force showed him visions. Jedi in robes of brown and white, their lightsabers ignited, fighting against waves of clones. The snap hiss of blasters, the screams of the dying, the final desperate stand of a doomed order. He saw younglings cut down, saw masters fall one by one, saw the temple burn. He opened his eyes and found Lobo watching him. "You see something?" Lobo asked. "The past," Quinlan said. "The end of everything I believed in." "Sounds depressing," Lobo said. "You Jedi types are always going on about the past." "Me? I live in the now. It's simpler." "The now is all you have when you can't die," Quinlan said. "But for the rest of us, the past matters. It shapes who we are." "Then maybe you should stop letting it shape you," Lobo said. "Maybe you should start shaping it instead." Quinlan looked at him, surprised. "That's surprisingly philosophical." "I got layers," Lobo said. "Like an onion, except the layers are all violence." Despite everything, Quinlan laughed. It was a bitter sound, but it was laughter nonetheless. They made camp in one of the more intact chambers, a room that had once served as a meditation hall. Thessa started a fire using broken furniture, and they sat around it as the sun set over the grasslands. For a brief moment, the war and the chase felt distant, as though they existed in a different galaxy entirely. "So," Thessa said, breaking the silence. What's the plan? We can't stay here forever. Eventually, the Empire will find us, or the Guild, or someone worse. I'm working on it, Quinlan said. There's someone I need to find, someone who might be able to help. Who? Lobo asked. A Jedi, Quinlan said. One of the few who survived the purge. She's been in hiding, moving from system to system, but last I heard she was somewhere in the Outer Rim. If anyone knows how to deal with something like you, it's her. You got a name? Lobo asked. Talzin, Quinlan said. Mother Talzin. She's not exactly a Jedi, more of a Force witch, but she understands things about the Force that the Order never acknowledged. Dark things. Dangerous things. Sounds like my kind of lady, Lobo said. She's also ruthless, Quinlan said. If she helps us, it'll be because she sees something to gain, not out of kindness. I can work with that, Lobo said. So where is she? Dathomir, Quinlan said. In the heart of Night Sister territory. Thessa groaned. Of course it is. They slept in shifts, taking turns keeping watch while the grasslands whispered around them. Quinlan dreamed of the Enclave in its glory, of masters teaching Padawans in sunlit courtyards, of a time before betrayal and war. He woke with tears on his face and wiped them away before the others could see. The next morning, they prepared to leave. Thessa finished repairing the hyperdrive, ran diagnostics on the shuttle's systems, and declared them ready for the jump to Dathomir. Quinlan stood at the edge of the ruins, staring out at the grasslands one last time. You're gonna miss this place, Lobo said, joining him. I already do, Quinlan said. But nostalgia won't save me. Action will. Now you're talking like a bounty hunter, Lobo said. I knew you had it in you. They boarded the shuttle and lifted off, leaving Dantooine and its ghosts behind. The jump to hyperspace was smooth, the coordinates locked, and for a few hours there was nothing to do but wait. Quinlan sat in the cargo hold, meditating, reaching into the Force for guidance. What he found was a vision, fragmented and incomplete. He saw Dathomir's red skies, saw the ruins of an ancient temple, saw himself standing in a chamber carved from black stone. And he saw Lobo, bound in chains of light, his face twisted with rage and something else. Something almost like fear. The vision faded, and Quinlan opened his eyes. Whatever waited for them on Dathomir, it was not going to be simple, it was not going to be easy. But it was their only chance. Dathomir rose from the void like a curse, its red skies churning with storms that never ended. The planet was a wound in the Force, a place where dark rituals and ancient magics had scarred reality itself. Quinlan felt it the moment they dropped out of hyperspace, a cold pressure that pressed against his mind like a blade. I hate this place, Thessa muttered. Everyone hates this place, Quinlan said. That's why it's perfect. They landed in a canyon far from the Night Sister strongholds, where the ruins of an old temple stood half buried in the red sand. Quinlan led them through the shattered gates, following the faint pulse in the Force that had guided him here. The temple was ancient, older than the Republic, older perhaps than the Jedi Order itself. Its walls were covered in carvings that depicted battles between beings of pure light and dark, cosmic struggles that had shaped the galaxy before recorded history. Quinlan traced his fingers over one carving, feeling the power thrumming beneath the stone. This place gives me the creeps, Thessa said. It should, Quinlan said. This is where the first Force users learned to bend reality to their will, where they made pacts with powers that should never have been summoned. Great, Lobo said. So we're dealing with ancient evil, my favorite. They descended deeper into the temple, following a spiral staircase that seemed to go on forever. The air grew colder, the darkness thicker, until even Quinlan's lightsaber provided only a small circle of illumination. Finally, they reached the bottom and stepped into a vast chamber. A figure waited for them. She was tall and lean, her skin the color of ash, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She wore robes that had once been white but were now stained with dust and time. Tattoos covered her arms and face, symbols of power and binding that pulsed with dark energy. A lightsaber hung at her belt, its hilt wrapped in leather that had seen 1,000 battles. "Quinlan Vos," she said, her voice like wind through dead leaves. "I wondered when you would come." "Mother Talzin," Quinlan said, bowing slightly. "I need your help." The woman laughed, a sound without warmth. "The last time you needed my help, you destroyed an entire Sith cult and left me to clean up the mess. Why should I help you now? Because this time, the problem isn't Sith." Quinlan gestured to Lobo, who stood in the doorway, his arms crossed. "This time, it's him." Talzin's gaze shifted to Lobo. Her eyes narrowed, and for a long moment she simply stared. Then she stepped closer, her hand rising as if to touch him. The air around her shimmered with dark energy, and for a moment the Force itself seemed to recoil. "He does not belong here," Talzin said finally. "He is a rupture, a thing that should not exist in this reality. His presence disturbs the weave of the Force itself." "Tell me something I don't know," Lobo said. Talzin lowered her hand and stepped back. "Where did you come from, creature?" "Somewhere else," Lobo said. "Somewhere better, and I ain't going back." "You have no choice in the matter," Talzin said. "The universe itself rejects you. Every moment you remain here, you tear at the fabric of reality. Eventually, you will be expelled, sent back to wherever you came from." "How long?" Quinlan asked. "Impossible to say," Talzin said. "Days, weeks, perhaps months. But it will happen. The Force always restores balance." "So we just wait?" Thessa said. "Hope he gets sucked back into his own dimension before he kills us all." "There is another option," Talzin said. She turned and walked deeper into the chamber. Quinlan and the others followed. They came to a sealed door covered in runes that glowed faintly red. The symbols were old, older than anything Quinlan had ever seen, and they radiated a power that made his skin crawl. "Beyond this door lies a prison," Talzin said, "built by the first Force users to contain beings that could not be destroyed. Entities of pure chaos, creatures from the spaces between dimensions, things that defied the natural order. If you can lure him inside, the seals will hold. He will live, but he will never escape." "And how do we get him inside?" Quinlan asked. "You make him believe he has won," Talzin said. "You make him cross that threshold of his own will." Quinlan looked at Lobo. The Zarnian was studying the door with interest, his red eyes glowing in the darkness. "You think I'm dumb enough to walk into a trap?" Lobo asked. "I think you're arrogant enough to believe you can break any trap," Quinlan said, "and that's going to be your downfall." Lobo's grin widened. "You got stones, Jedi. I'll give you that." Talzin placed her hand on the door, and the runes flared to life. The door groaned, ancient mechanisms grinding into motion, and slowly it swung open. Beyond lay a chamber carved from black stone, its walls inscribed with more symbols of binding and containment. In the center of the chamber was a circle, perfectly round, its perimeter marked with glowing runes. "The moment he steps inside that circle," Talzin said, "the seals will activate. But you must make him believe he has won. You must make him cross that threshold willingly." "How?" Thessa asked. "By giving him what he wants most," Talzin said. She looked at Quinlan. "A fight he cannot lose." Quinlan understood. He drew his lightsaber, the blade igniting with a snap hiss that echoed through the chamber. "One last fight," he said to Lobo. "You and me. No tricks, no running. We settle this here." Lobo's eyes gleamed with anticipation. "Now you're talking." They entered the chamber. The fight began the moment the door closed. Behind them, Lobo charged, his fists swinging with the force of starship cannons, and Quinlan met him with the lightsaber raised. The blade carved a glowing arc through the air, biting deep into Lobo's shoulder, but Lobo simply grinned and kept coming. His fist connected with Quinlan's jaw, snapping his head back and lifting him off his feet. Quinlan hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up slashing. The lightsaber took Lobo's left arm off at the elbow. The limb hit the floor, twitched once, and began to regenerate. Quinlan pressed the attack, using the Force to enhance his speed and strength. He moved like water, flowing around Lobo's strikes, carving wounds that healed almost as quickly as they appeared. But he was tiring. His body was breaking down, his muscles screaming, his lungs burning. He could not keep this up forever. Lobo, on the other hand, seemed to be enjoying himself. He laughed as he fought, his voice booming through the chamber, and with every blow he landed, Quinlan felt something inside him crack. "You're good, Jedi," Lobo said, blocking a strike and driving his knee into Quinlan's ribs. "But you ain't good enough." Quinlan staggered back, coughing blood. He was at the edge of the binding circle now, the runes glowing beneath his feet. Just a few more steps, just a little further. He let Lobo drive him back, step by step, feigning exhaustion, selling the performance. Lobo grinned and advanced, his fists raised, his eyes burning with the joy of imminent victory. "Do it," Quinlan gasped. "Finish it." Lobo raised his fist, savoring the moment. He stepped forward, into the circle. The seals activated. Light erupted from the runes, chains of pure energy that wrapped around Lobo's limbs and dragged him to his knees. He roared, struggling against them, his muscles straining, but the chains held. The Force itself pressed down on him, binding him to the stone floor with the weight of stars. "No," Lobo bellowed. "This isn't how it ends. It's not an mephic ending," Quinlan said, standing slowly. Blood dripped from his mouth, his vision swimming. "It's a pause. You'll live, you'll rage, but you'll do it alone, in the dark, where you can't hurt anyone else." Lobo's eyes burned with fury, and for a moment Quinlan thought the chains would break. The Zarnian's body swelled, his muscles bulging, veins standing out like cables. The air itself seemed to scream under the pressure of his will. But then Talzin stepped forward, her hands weaving patterns in the air, and the seals intensified. More chains materialized, wrapping around Lobo's torso, his neck, his limbs, until he was completely immobilized. His roar became a scream, then a growl, then finally silence as the binding magic seeped into his very essence. The chamber sealed itself, the door swinging shut with a finality that echoed through the temple. The runes on the door flared once, then dimmed to a faint glow. Quinlan stood outside the chamber, breathing hard, his body a map of pain. Thessa and Talzin stood beside him, both watching the sealed door with expressions of wary relief. "Will it hold?" Thessa asked. "It will hold," Talzin said. "For as long as this temple stands, the binding is absolute, tied to the very foundations of this place. He cannot break it from within." "And from without?" Quinlan asked. "That depends," Talzin said, "on whether anyone is foolish enough to try and free him." Quinlan nodded. He felt the Force settling around them, the disturbance that Lobo had caused beginning to fade like ripples on a pond. The galaxy would heal, the wound would close, but the memory would remain. "What will you do now?" Talzin asked. "I don't know," Quinlan admitted. "Keep running, I suppose. Keep surviving. It's all I know how to do." "Perhaps," Talzin said, "it is time you learned to do more than survive. Time you learned to live." Quinlan looked at her, surprised by the gentleness in her voice. "Is that even possible? After everything?" "Possibility," Talzin said, "is determined by will, not circumstance. If you wish to live, Jedi, then live. The choice is yours." She turned and walked back into the depths of the temple, her robes trailing behind her like shadows. Quinlan watched her go, then looked at Thessa. "Come on," Thessa said. "Let's get out of here. This place is depressing." They climbed the spiral staircase, ascended through the temple's halls, and emerged into the red light of Dathomir's sky. The storm still raged, the wind still howled, but to Quinlan it felt different somehow. Lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. They returned to the shuttle and lifted off, leaving the temple and its prisoner behind. As they climbed toward orbit, Quinlan looked back at the planet one last time. Somewhere down there, in a chamber of black stone, Lobo raged against his chains. Somewhere down there, a predator dreamed of freedom. But for now, the galaxy was safe. The shuttle jumped to hyperspace, and Dathomir vanished behind them. In the binding chamber, deep beneath the surface of Dathomir, Lobo tested his chains for the 1,000th time. They held, unyielding, woven from forces he did not understand. He had broken planets, shattered stars, torn his way through armies, and came out laughing. But these chains, these fragging chains, they held. He laughed, the sound echoing through the darkness. It was not the laugh of defeat. It was the laugh of someone who had eternity to plan, to plot, to wait. "All right, Jedi," he said to the empty chamber. "You win this round. But I got nothing but time. And sooner or later, someone's gonna come looking for me. Someone's gonna open that door." The chains glowed brighter, as if in response, tightening their grip. "And when they do," Lobo continued, his grin never fading, "I'm gonna find you. I'm gonna hunt you down, and we're gonna have us a proper fight. One that ends the way it's supposed to." In the silence that followed, the Force whispered. It spoke of balance and cycles, of imprisonment and eventual freedom, of predators and prey locked in an eternal dance. It spoke of a future where chains would break and hunters would hunt again. But that was a story for another time. Quinlan Vos stood on the bridge of a new ship, not the stolen shuttle, but a proper freighter he and Thessa had acquired through means both legal and otherwise. The stars streamed past in hyperspace, endless and beautiful, and for the first time in years, Quinlan allowed himself to hope. "Where to?" Thessa asked from the pilot's chair. "Somewhere quiet," Quinlan said. "Somewhere the Empire doesn't care about. Somewhere we can rest." "You think we've earned that?" "I think we've survived long enough to try." Thessa nodded and adjusted their course. The ship hummed around them, a familiar and comforting sound, and Quinlan closed his eyes. In the Force, he felt the echoes of the battle, the pain and the triumph, the fear and the courage. He felt the galaxy, breathing, alive and vast and full of possibility, and for the first time in a very long time, he felt at peace. But peace in the galaxy was always temporary. Weeks passed, then months. Quinlan and Thessa found work on the edges of known space, small jobs that kept them fed and moving. They avoided Imperial entanglements, stayed clear of Guild territory, and slowly began to build something resembling a life. Then came the day when Quinlan felt a disturbance in the Force, subtle but unmistakable. A ripple, like the first tremor before an earthquake. He reached out with his senses and found the source. Dathomir, the temple, the seals. Something had changed. Quinlan stood at the viewport of their ship, staring out at the stars, and knew with absolute certainty that the chains had weakened. Not broken, not yet, but weakened. Time and entropy were doing what no force could, eroding the ancient magic that held Lobo prisoner. "How long?" Thessa asked, standing beside him. She had seen the look on his face and understood immediately. "Years," Quinlan said. "Maybe decades, but not forever." "What do we do?" "We prepare," Quinlan said. "We train, we gather allies, because when those chains break, the main man is going to come looking for me, and next time I need to be ready." Thessa nodded. "Then we'd better get started." The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying them toward an uncertain future. Behind them, across the vast distances of space, in a chamber deep beneath Dathomir's surface, Lobo counted the days, counted the hours, counted every single second until the moment he would be free. And when that moment came, the galaxy would learn what it meant to be hunted by something that could not die, could not tire, and would never, ever stop. The legend of Lobo and the Jedi would become myth, told in cantinas and spaceports across the Outer Rim. Some said the Zarnian was still imprisoned, others that he had escaped and was hunting in the unknown regions. But everyone agreed on one thing: if you saw a pale figure on a chrome bike, tearing through the stars with a grin and a chain. You ran. You ran as fast and as far as you could, because the main man was coming. And nobody, not Jedi, not Sith, not even the Force itself, could stop him forever.